Minister of Finance outlining why the Investment and Incentives Act should be repealed. Union leaders concerned about job security in the public service. And they're preparing for a lobster fest in Williamstown.
The Bahamas Tonight Northern Edition starts now.
This is the Bahamas Tonight, the Northern Edition. Good evening, all. I am Megan Shepard. It's so great to have you with us. Topping news, the Deputy Prime Minister addressing the Bahamas Association of Compliance Officers at the 12th Annual Northern Conference as they examined the role of compliance in the economic transformation of Grand Bahama. Shashina Roll was there.
All of the senior cabinet persons.
Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance K. Peter Turnquest was the guest speaker during the 12th Annual BACO Conference. His focus, the Grand Bahama Investment and Incentives Act. Turnquest shares why it was important to replace and repeal the act with a more aggressive plan.
Our reason for repealing the act is very simple. It is counterproductive to the ease of doing business in Grand Bahama. We believe that Grand Bahama and Freeport needed an opportunity to rebound. And this particular piece of legislation did not help us to create the kind of certainty to attract investors here for the long term. The bill did not help spur investments in Grand Bahama. In fact, it did the opposite. The application process was viewed by many as introducing extra cost, bureaucracy, and uncertainty into Freeport's investment and business climate, especially since granting the incentives is at the government's discretion.
He says changes to this act will encourage the ease of doing business and will come with some exemptions for real property taxes.
I wish to emphasize that this bill, all homeowners within the port area will be exempt from real property taxes. It is important to note this distinction from the 2016 legislative regime, where exemptions, including real property tax exemptions, were limited to licenses of the Port Authority only, meaning that only the Port Authority, DevCo, Hutchison were exempted from real property taxes and capital gains taxes and all the rest of it. Everybody else had to apply.
While Grand Bahama's economy continues to struggle, the Deputy Prime Minister says he believes that this plan will assist in rebuilding the local economy, but notes that these challenges did not happen overnight, as he pointed to the comments made by the former Minister for Grand Bahama, Michael Darville, during the Progressive Liberal Party's convention last night.
Having been voted out of office on his administration's failure to stimulate Grand Bahama's economy, such criticisms after 6 months is rich and stretches the bounds of reason. I just wish to remind him that on assuming office, this administration inherited a broken economy, closed hotels, a flagging economy, and significant unemployment numbers, especially among the youth.
He says the government has no choice but to get Grand Bahama back to its former glory days.
Never mind that Abaco is gaining on our heels every day. Exuma is doing okay. Grand Bahama still is the second largest economy, and it is, if this economy flags, it is going to cause tremendous pressure on the rest of the country. And so we have an obligation to do what we can to ensure that Grand Bahama succeeds.
He shares some of the government's plan to help in the rebounding of Grand Bahama's economy.
In part, the answer is employing the principles of sound macroeconomic management. The issue of fiscal responsibility and reform plays a vital role in this regard, as does the efforts to attract new foreign direct investment and new industries to the island.
Shashina Roll, ZNS Network News.
A noted attorney speaking out against Emera's proposition to buy 100% shares of the Grand Bahama Power Company. The attorney is calling on the powers that be to think long-term on what this move could mean for Bahamian shareholders. President and attorney Fred Smith, QC, is making his opposition to the buyout of Bahamian shareholders in the Grand Bahama Power Company by Emira known loud and clear. Smith says that shareholders are being left in the dark regarding the buyout of Bahamian shares, and he is skeptical of what this could mean for Bahamians. Smith says he bought his shares decades ago as an investment for his future generations.
I don't care at what value. They could be paying me $100 a share. I don't want to sell. I want my shares. I want to keep my shares. I bought them decades ago because I wanted to increase value. And so anybody who wants to sell their shares, feel free to do so. But those of us who do not wish to sell, why can't Emira simply give us 1 share in GB Power for 1 share in ICD Utilities? Simple.
Smith is adamant that having such a vital and profitable company owned 100% by a foreign company is not in the best interest of Bahamians.
We have a right to run our own country. The Bahamas belongs to Bahamians. And so if Emira is generating super profits because GB Power is one of the most profitable electrical operating companies that Emira in its galaxy of companies has. So I don't want to receive some kind of dividend on a depository receipt where my profit is based on the average of profits and losses of all of the Emira companies. As a Bahamian citizen, as a resident of Freeport, as a landowner, and as a licensee under the Hawkesbury Creek Agreement, and as an owner of shares in GB Power through ICDU, I want to earn direct profits of what that company makes in Freeport.
Smith is urging the powers that be to reconsider this proposition by Emira and to allow Bahamians to have shares in the Grand Bahama Power Company. He says that he believes that the power company has been in negotiations to provide power to Florida Power and Light. If this deal goes through, Smith says that those who do have shares in the power company stand to make a very significant profit.
So just imagine how valuable the shares of GB Power are going to become when they do strike a deal with Florida Power and Light and they start supplying from either a coal power generation plant or an LNG regasification facility or other recyclable or renewable energies. Once GB Power is able to supply Southern Florida through Florida Power and Light with power, the shares of GB Power and the shares of ICDU for my children 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now would be worth millions for each person.
Leaders of the Trade Union Congress on Grand Bahama warning the government not to accept the recommendations offered by the International Monetary Fund. Last month, the IMF recommended that the government cut the civil service wage bill by millions of dollars, but that is not sitting well with some in the labor movement. Acting President of the Bahamas Customs and Immigration Allied Workers Union, Rudolph Stubbs, addressing a recent recommendation by the International Monetary Fund to the government of the Bahamas, suggesting that the government could save millions of dollars by cutting the salaries of public service workers and downsizing. Stubbs says that the government should meet with trade union leaders to discuss the severity of such a decision.
We have come to the realization that it ought to be assessed properly. That is, the government would need to look into those various departments that may appear to be bloated or that are bloated.
Vice President Duran Brooks also in agreement. He notes that the government is mandated to provide economic opportunities for Bahamians and also hire Bahamians to the public sector when the need arises. He says while the government has not made an official decision as yet, he is advising that they do so with caution.
The Bahamas government hired these civil servants. They did not hire themselves. So now the Bahamas government has found itself in a bit of a difficulty. But what we're saying is proceed with caution in whatever it is you plan to do.
Fourth Vice of the NTCUB, Quinton LaRota, echoing the sentiments of his union colleagues. He says the government must consider the domino effect this decision could have.
At the onset, from the first advice, we want to say, no, let's be cautious here. Let's look at this. We have an economy that is teetering somewhat, that needs improvement. And if your response is to downsize in a dramatic way the public sector, you're going to bring the economy to a screeching halt. Because those people who would have been employed would no longer be employed, and that would negatively impact everybody else who depend on them for economic viability.
The union leaders say they will not remain silent and will continue to speak up for those in the public sector. Now, the Minister of Finance and Deputy Prime Minister, the Honorable K. Peter Turnquist, says that the government notes the observations of the IMF, which, as a multilateral international organization, bears the experience and technical expertise to inform decisions, and ultimately any decision on human resources or fiscal policy will be made by the government based on national input and national consideration. Minister Turnquist says that while the government appreciates the comments and concerns of the noted union leaders, respectfully, it appears that they are premature as it regards to any action by the government in the future. He says all major labor organizations will have full and open consultation and input at a standard protocol under this administration. In other news, police in Abaco need your help in locating a young woman who is reported missing. Hardiria Boodle Hyler, age 25, of Tragicki, was last seen on Saturday morning. If you have any information that could help in the search for the missing Abaco woman, you should call Abaco Police at 367-2560, 919-911, or call your nearest police station. Stay with us. The Bahamas Tonight, the Northern Edition continues in just a moment.